For this video, we're going to need some rather unusual things. First, a tree. We're not going to take it, but we do need a tree to do this video. And secondly, we need several months. A year would be even better. My name is Rico Tyler, and I'm with the National STEM Scholars Program, sharing with you ideas that help you bring more phenomena-based science, more claim evidence reasoning, and more sense-making into your classroom. Today's activity is going to be working with 7th grade Next Generation Science Standards Performance Expectations, in particular 2 of them. LS1-3, which is about structures in plants, and LS1-2, which is about subsystems and substructures. The other thing that this activity is going to do is deal with something that is long-term. Students are used to doing activities and experiments that take place over minutes, maybe hours, and occasionally days. This activity is an activity that takes place over months, up to and possibly including a year. This activity is called the tree portfolio. And it's actually, despite the length of time that it takes, very simple to do. The equipment is very minimal. You're going to need some sort of camera, usually a smartphone or a tablet. Some of you may have Chromebooks in your classroom that you could take pictures with. Anything that takes a digital picture is fine in this activity. The other thing that you're going to need is access to a PowerPoint or to Google Slides, which is pretty common. And you're going to need, once we mentioned, that time. What we're going to do here is try to keep track of the activities of a tree across a semester. That's why we call it the tree portfolio. We're going to, our students are going to find a tree and then literally take a picture of that tree every single week. And you could change the period of time. You could make it every 2 weeks or even once a month. But somewhere between once a week and every 2 weeks is the best way to do it. But to photograph that tree every week across the term. Most classes would do this at the start of the school year and do it across a semester or a year, catching what happens in the fall. Or you could start this after Christmas and catch what's going on in the spring. Find your tree and then photograph it. You're going to want to find a tree that tends to be kind of isolated from the others. You don't want to pick a tree in a forest and then try to distinguish it. So find a tree that stands somewhat apart from others, and then find a location where you can stand to photograph it. This could be on a sidewalk where you know you're standing in the same spot. It could be any situation, but the key is you're going to stand, or your students are going to stand in the exact same spot each time they take a picture and shoot that tree, framing the tree in the same way. Most of the people are going to do this with a smartphone, frame the shot vertically so that you can capture the tree, and then you take each of those images and stick them into a PowerPoint. Each slide representing one photograph, chronologically based, and then put the time and the date on the images as you go. One of the secrets to getting good pictures in this tree portfolio is to always shoot each weekly shot from the same spot. How do you know it's the same spot? Well, in this case, I have this pole, and I use the pole as my location. I sit on it, in fact. So my tree, I'm shooting from the same position each week using my camera, the camera being in a vertical position, so I get the shot oriented to my tree. So each week my shots are going to be taken from the same distance, they're going to frame the tree in the same way, and that gives me almost that stop motion aspect where week by week each one of my shots is going to be taken from the same spot. What I'm showing you here is an example of a tree portfolio that I'm currently working on. I started it, as you can see, on February the 9th, 2020, on a nice sunny afternoon. You see the tree nicely framed in the picture. I'm sitting on that concrete base for that light pole so that I framed my shot up, and then I just start taking pictures. We go on into February, and you can tell I'm taking pictures of the tree and there's not much happening. I go into March. I was actually expecting to see more, but that's all the point. I'm surprised as well. On March the 13th, in this picture, is the first time that I really noticed some change. It's not in my tree. It's behind the tree. Two trees, two dogwoods, I think you would call them, that are beginning to flower. Behind them, you see some bushes that are beginning to show a little bit of green. Spring is finally making an appearance. On the 21st, you can see more green color. Then on April the 4th, some of the foreground bushes are beginning to green out. Some grass is growing. Finally, on April the 21st, my tree starts getting some leaves. And into April and into May, it really blooms out. Here on May the 30th, I've got a tree that's nice, full of leaves. I'm watching a lot of change that has happened. On into August. In August, you can see my tree has obviously grown out quite a bit. So now we're waiting to see what happens when the tree finally starts to change in the fall. In September, I'm not seeing much difference. October, the foreground bushes change. They're beginning to show some oranges and reds, but my tree is holding on. If you take a look later in the month, my tree is drooping just a little bit, and the bushes in front of the tree are beginning to shed leaves, but my tree staying pretty good. Finally, in November, I can tell that a few of the leaves on my tree are beginning to slowly turn a bit yellow. They're beginning to sag just a little bit. But the bushes have almost lost their leaves completely. And the trees in the background, as you can tell in this picture, are beginning to turn color. Leaves are being lost, but my tree is doing pretty well for being November. On the 29th of November, you can tell that my tree is turned completely a kind of an orange color. Finally, on the 30th of December, you can see my tree has lost all of its leaves. They're now kind of in a pile on the bottom. So the question is, what happens now? We're kind of turning the corner back to where we began almost a year ago. And that's the point. We have got this record of the tree, and notice it's different. Every student's tree is going to be a little bit different. The story around it, that's what I like about this activity. There's plenty of data to collect, plenty of observations to make, and it's not necessarily all predictable. Finally, on March the 16th, not my tree, but in the background, those two smaller trees that a year ago were budding with white blooms, they have come back to white blooms. I've got both Friday, March 13th, 2020, and Tuesday, March the 16th, 2021, side by side. Essentially, those two dogwoods are blooming within a few days of exactly the same point. Those two dogwoods mark the equinox, because the equinox is on March the 21st, and they're blooming. The picture on the right, which is from 2021, was taken on the 16th, but I drove past that tree 3 days earlier on the 13th, and it had just begun to bloom. Those two trees are blooming within days of the same date each year. Something that I wouldn't have thought would be what they do, but in my portfolio of pictures, I've got this information right here. The concept of a tree portfolio is a very flexible classroom activity. You could do this as a whole class activity where the entire class is observing one tree over the course of several months. You could do this as an individual activity where different students are looking at different trees, different types of foliage. You could do this as an activity that students do at home, where they're selecting a tree at home and using a camera, a smartphone, or a tablet at home to take their pictures. You can do this in the fall to watch how the seasons change. You can do this in the spring. The key here is you're looking at long-term changes in a very simple way. This is one of the things that a smartphone can do. It provides an awful lot of power, an awful lot of ability for a teacher and students to do different kinds of activities. And in future videos, we're going to try to show you some more things that you can do with a camera in the hands of students. And on that note, thank you for watching. And until next time, this is Rico Tyler with the National STEM Scholars Program.